on behalf of the seminar committee. Let me thank you all for being here. I think Alagu also realizes that with our individual pursuits of comprehensive projects and placements and electives, this actually does call for a round of applause. So thank you. Secondly, Professor Saurabh Mukherjee is not here, but I would much have wanted him to be here. He perhaps is having a session, but he is the one who is responsible for connecting us to Alagu. So thank you to the professor as well. And finally, Alagu Balaraman, our chief guest, our guest speaker today, Vice President Process and HR at Britania. We have all heard about him so much, I don't think I need to repeat it, about his accomplished career as well as his impeccable qualifications. But one thing that I would like to mention is that we have a very diverse set of experience in this one person today. May that be an experience in the consulting world or in industry, may that be an experience of information technology, process or business strategy. So hopefully all this experience should come out today in the topic that we have. The topic is practical challenges in bringing about large-scale change in organizations. So with that, I would like to profusely welcome and thank Alagu for taking the time out to address us.
I was wondering what that little gizmo, upload, download, do whatever. I said no, nothing. We will just talk. And I'm assuming that it's you're comfortable with a highly interactive kind of session. When Amit was describing me as having a highly, very, what did you say, diverse experience, what he meant is, from a career planning perspective, I'm a walking disaster. Plan out my career, how should I do it? I feel that I'm the last person you should talk to. Because there's been practically zero planning as far as that's concerned. And it's been more one of look for anything that's interesting and go and do it. I think that works, and I'm going to continue doing that. Someday I'll find out what I really like to do. That time I might stop. When we were talking about this this talk and coming over here, actually I had met Professor Mukherjee, and I'm used to calling him Saurabh. We met in Goa. So I think it was probably over a couple of drinks that we decided something like this should happen. He was giving a talk, I was giving a talk at a particular conference, and he said, would you like to come and spend some time talking with the people over here? I said I'd be delighted to, because very frankly I enjoy coming to academic institutions and I enjoy interacting with people. My wife claims I love giving yarn, so therefore it's something that comes up. The topic that we pinned upon was change management. I have a very selfish reason for talking about change management. I have found in the past that it helps a lot to talk about things which you're grappling with at that point in time. And it helps me to clarify thoughts in my own head. Very often I get a lot of very good ideas from people who are sitting and listening and who are through the course of the interactions. So I am coming here partly to share with you experiences that I've had and some of the frustrations that I've had in this area, and partly to gain from you directly or indirectly some solutions to problems that we're grappling with at this point. The reason why I believe change management as a topic is something that's very important, and it has become increasingly so, and it will continue to be more and more important as we go along, is because the world that we used to operate in and the world in which a lot of the theory that we base our thinking on is actually a very different world from what is actually out there, and what we work with. So the predictability and the fixed kind of relations that were there, and on which a lot of our stuff that we studied, particularly in management, I don't see that in reality. So when I was in B school, I used to have arguments in behavioral sciences, I think it was, and say that, I don't agree with what you're talking about, because when I worked, I didn't see that, I saw something very different. And I still see that things seem to be a little bit out of sync. That's very good. It's very good because it gives you scope when you go out there to apply your own mind and solve problems. It's very boring when all the problems are solved and you just have to apply the answers in a job. Let me give you a small example of where change management will. It was one of my early experiences. Put it like that. That's the time when I was in consulting, and we were doing a project for developing a technology strategy for this company which had multiple businesses. One of the businesses was in the area of travel. So it was a tie-up with an international firm. They did things like travel bookings, holidays, and all kinds of stuff. So I walk into this office in the city, I meet the CEO of that particular business, and we're talking, and along comes this person who heads IT, and she was obviously in a highly agitated frame of mind. And she said, I want you to come and see the system, and tell me, is there anything really wrong with it? So it was a very unusual kind of introduction to a person. You just landed up over there, you're talking about the business, and then this person came and said that. And I spent some half an hour with her, and she was wild with the whole crowd in that particular business, saying that they are completely unreasonable. There's this huge thing that we have done and developed a completely new system, we're trying to deploy it, and they're not using it. So that was actually not what I had come there to do. But in any case, since she was so agitated, I said, let's go there and meet some people and let's find out about it. What they've done is they've actually identified and designed a piece of software. And that was meant to help automate the operations that are there in that particular business. And at the crux of the problem, a person who wants to do some kind of, let's say, they're planning a holiday, I have to make a series of bookings for that. And then I'm trying to use this software. First I have to do it with one hand, and that's very difficult. Then we can suddenly say, I don't have, this customer is not there in the customer master, please enter this. And there are 4 pages that I have to enter. I can't tell this person, hold on while I enter 4 pages of data and then I can take your booking. So what I do is I dump the software and I write it on a piece of paper, and then I go ahead and make all the bookings, and then I go. At the heart of the problem was the fact that this lady was looking at a project as a technical project of what needs to be done, and looked at it from a very narrow perspective of, I have these requirements and I'm meeting these requirements. Are those requirements actually comprehensive and addressing all the challenges that a person has? The answer was no. It's pretty obvious. The way I'm saying it is pretty obvious, but in that office, it was like war going on at that point in time. And because she had taken that position, she was not willing to take a look at it from a different point of view, and everybody else was also not in a position willing to take a look at it from a different. So all this money that was spent, time that has been spent, and they had nothing left at the end of it. My recommendation to them was scrap the whole thing and start all over again. Not because it was technically infeasible, but I didn't believe that they would be able to make that work. They wouldn't have got the two sides to agree on something. Things had just gone too far if you noticed how people were reacting and behaving to certain things. The aspect of change management is in most cases about, I am here, I want to go there. How do I get everybody to go along on this particular journey? And it's not a very simple kind of thing to deal with because you're dealing with people. And for reasons which I'll come to a little later, it's getting more and more complicated than it was in the past. If you take change management as a term, it's one of those beautiful buzzwords. Everybody uses it. If I had 1 rupee for every presentation that I saw change management in, I can retire rich. It is incredible how everyone says change management is essential, it's vital, etc. When you ask them what are you going to do about it, they won't have an answer. They will, and I'm talking about people from, let's say, a person who's coming to do a small job within your office, to bringing in a global consultant and saying we're going to do this massive project, and we will have one of those nice PPTs which have all those bars going across here, there, work streams, this stuff, and change management is one stream. But then you get into the nitty-gritty of what is that change management, and you find it's actually quite hollow. it's very similar to that other buzzword that was floating around, which was systems approach. Okay, so everyone says systems approach is very important. You have to look at things in a more holistic perspective. You can't take just a part and work on it because there are interactions that happen. But you ask anybody to define what you're going to do as a result of the systems approach, and very, very rarely do you get an answer. So while this thing is a nice buzzword, I have yet to see a really robust mechanism in place for people to apply this in practical situations. What I thought I would do is instead take you through 3 or 4 significant examples of what I have experienced, and we try and cover those some aspects of what is important for change management. Then we try to pull this together with some things which I have found useful in doing it, and I'll give you an example of what's going on right now in Britania. There was a project that we were doing for, it was a very large project. In fact, it was one of the largest consulting projects going on in the country at that time. And it was going very badly. I was at that time in Coopers and Lybrand. The project was taken up by Pricewaterhouse, and then we merged, and we became PricewaterhouseCoopers. Okay, so I had no clue about that project. And what happened was there was a particular element of that project where they needed a specific set of skills. So they asked me if my practice could handle that. So we went in to do it. And we've been doing work on helping, I think that had to do with the selection of the ERP system. It was one of the biggest ERP deals going in the country at that time, so obviously there was a huge amount of pressure. The company that we were working for was a public sector company, so there was also a lot of governmental pressure coming in because the vendors were putting pressures with the government onto individuals within the company. So everybody was very high-strung. And the situation was not exactly in the greatest of shapes. So we go into this project. I went and met this senior, I think he was a executive director or director at that time, and we were talking about what needs to be done and how we would plan to go ahead, etc., etc. So as we were talking, I happened to say that let's do this, let's not do this, it doesn't make sense in this particular project. He suddenly stopped talking, he reached down, he picked up this big file, and then he opened it and shut through the whole thing. And sitting there wondering what he's up to. Then he opens to one particular page, takes it, and he holds it in front of my face. And he says, it says here you will do it. So you will do it. Okay. I had never been spoken to by a client like that. Having something held in front of my face and says, it says here you will do it, you will do it. And I realized then that the situation this project was in was far worse than anybody had told me before they dropped me into that particular circumstance. We worked with that client over a period of time, and at all times they were deeply suspicious of every single move that we were making because they knew that the situation was difficult. They expected that we would try to wriggle out of certain circumstances, and they didn't. There was basically a lack of trust in the air. And it magically changed on one day. There was we were discussing something, and we were trying to work out what we were going to frame in order to. There was a lot of legality involved in it. When you're doing a selection and you're working in a public sector unit, you have to make sure that people are terrified that CBC will get them and shove them into jail. So they were very worried about, nervous about it. So we were going through various things, and there was some particular thing which I said, this I will not allow you to put into one particular statement. Immediately, I think his antenna went up and he said, why? What's up? So we went on sometimes, and I said, look, this particular thing exposes you personally to a so-and-so risk, and I can't allow you to put that into the statement. The guy's jaw dropped, and I think from that evening on, he completely changed. It needed time for him to absorb the fact that I was as interested in his well-being and in protecting his interests as I was in protecting the interests of the firm that I worked for. And it became a pivot it had a very unexpected side effect, which was they said that I had to be associated with that project, and then the firm forced me to get transferred from Bangalore to Delhi, because then I spent the next 10 years in Delhi. That was an unexpected side effect, because he kept saying, I'm going to ask you to come over here, and I said, no, I have a business to run, I can't come and work on this one project. And the next thing I know, I was told, please work on that project. You still have to meet your quarterly numbers for your business that you're running, but you have to work on this project as well. The essence over there was one of the person having faith and you having credibility with that person. A lot of the things that I'm going to give in examples are very soft issues, because while we hammer out a lot of the hard issues in what we plan and design, particularly the way we do it, whether it's business school or how many people here are engineers? So am I. Okay? That makes us all very poorly qualified. Combination of engineer and manager is not the worst I could think of for change management. So it took me a long time to learn about that particular thing. So you need to actively think this one through, okay, and see what the circumstances are. Because we tend to think of the world in terms of analysis, cause and effect, and a very deterministic kind of thing. That works extremely well for simple systems. But in a complex system, it's very difficult to predict what will be behavior. And people are incredibly complex systems. Believe me, I'm now looking after HR also as one of the things that I worked with since last year. And some people ask me, how do you find HR? I said, I preferred it when I was in IT. At least the servers don't talk back to you. You can do something and then that's it. So the first aspect is credibility. You must have credibility if you're going to drive change. There's a very closely allied thing to that. By the way, feel free to interrupt at any time if you have a question. There's I don't want to make this into a complete monologue. Let me give you a second example. You go from public sector to a multinational corporation, who is a client of mine, and it was the most amusing situation you can imagine. We got called by these people saying, we would like you to help design a particular solution. It was again a technology solution. And our business is growing in India. We can't manage, we were running their business on Excel, and they said we can't manage it any further. So we would like some kind of technical design which would help us to go through it. Those were days before many of these things had got standardized and simplified. So most people were really scared of technology. So obviously when people are scared of something, consulting practices immediately start a practice around it and go and rip them off for as much as they can get. So we had started a technology strategy practice, and I was busy ripping off clients for as much as I could get when they had fear, uncertainty and doubt. So these people said we need a system design. We went there and I said, what's the budget? And they said, well, we've been clear for about $2 million. So I nearly fell off my chair. I'm talking now about 13, 14 years ago. Okay. So I said, interim solution, and you got $2 million, why don't you just implement SAP and go on? They said, no, not SAP. Anything but SAP. So it was the strangest brief that I ever had. And they said that's the diktat from their corporate office in the US. So anything but SAP. So we designed a particular solution. They liked it a lot. From India, it went across to London. Because India at that time came under Africa, Middle East, and India was sort of attached to that. So there was one way they carved the world out of that. So London said, this is great, it's a very nice solution. It was based on MFG Pro. And then two of these people from the client side went to the US to go to the corporate office and talk about it. They came back and they said it was as if they lined us up and they shot us down with a machine gun. We didn't get beyond 10 minutes. Okay, the CIO, global CIO ripped the whole thing apart and threw us out. So I was very puzzled. Because as a design, it was a very good design. It met their requirements. It would have met their requirements for some time. It looked very cost effective. And I would have thought if you didn't spend $2 million and come up with something. Then next thing I know is the global CIO is visiting India and he wants to have lunch with you. So I I went for this lunch. The client calls and says lunch, Sunday afternoon lunch. I hate working on weekends. So we went across there and he was sitting and having lunch and he picked a fight right there in the restaurant in the hotel and said, this is wrong in your report, that's wrong in your report. So I argued back and there were actually about 5-6 of them. Everyone else was busy looking at their plates and eating, including a global partner who had come from the firm, also from the US. Then they said, we booked a meeting room, so shall we go there? So I was a little foxed by the whole thing. We go into the meeting room, we spent 7 hours that day in that room. And he wanted to know the ins and outs of the whole thing. And first they had a very large global plan that they had in place. And he asked one of his people, please present to him the whole thing. After we had first 45 minutes, 1 hour of arguing, this chap presented what their plan was. Then at the end of it, he turns and asks me, what do you think? So I said, well, if I had known that you have this plan, I would not have recommended this solution. But I didn't know you have this plan. And I can also tell you that my client didn't know you have this plan. Because if they knew it, I would know it. So then he wanted to know, why did you come up with this solution? I found out later what the problem was. Apparently, at the global level, there was a debate between an SAP and an energy pro as the final solution. Okay. As the solution they were going to use. They went to SAP. This CIO overruled whoever was asking them and said, we will do this. They viewed this as an attempt by these squirts sitting in India who are on the right side of our decimal place as far as business volumes are concerned, to bring an energy pro into the whole thing. I mean, how the devil could they do this? How could we allow them to do this? So the result was, he suspected there was some kind of, hanky-panky going on, and there were politics involved in this whole thing. So people over here had no clue about it. They merrily went along thinking it's a good idea, and they got machine gunned down, as I said. Now, when we understood that, and he understood, I spent the next 1.5 hours talking to them about what doing business in India is. So, what is the mechanisms, what is the situation, how do you manufacture, how do you distribute? We went threadbare through the industry structure and everything. And that's when he understood that while India is small in value terms, operationally it's vast. So we spent a lot of time and we left the room, each one having a very good opinion of the other. And the next day was actually, Monday was the presentation with everybody together, including the India team and this and that. The reason why they had said we will not take SAP is because the global solution was on SAP. They didn't want a second version of an SAP implementation happen. Made a lot of sense. The reason why they agreed to India having a separate solution is because they said that India wants some solution, yeah, give them a couple of $1 million, let them sort it out, let them go ahead, as long as it's not SAP. That was their thinking. And the reason why they were worried is because of what I told you, about the solution that actually turned out. And they had a 5-year game plan, roadmap, India didn't figure out it, so that's why they said, take your interim solution. The next day they came in and the first thing they started off with was, they went there and announced, we have reconsidered the situation. India will be in the 5-year roadmap. In fact, it will start immediately. We believe you need it right now. So the guys in India didn't understand what was happening at all. Okay. First, they get shot down for something that they go and talk about in the US. Then after that, along comes the global CIO. Not one person from India, the client side, was invited for this meeting. They don't know what was going on in the meeting. And then after that, they suddenly told, you get everything that you want. So here it is, let's go ahead. If you look at it, this is like a comedy of errors. It could be something like Oscar Wilde writing a play or something like that. It was just full of poor communication happening at one end and the other end. Okay. Nobody knew what was the reason for any of these decisions being taken. Okay. And as a result, what happened as a result?
Misinterpretation.
Sorry?
Misinterpretation and
misinterpretation, then misinterpretation goes to what, and then it becomes proposal being job. So something in between. Distrust actually becomes politics at that point in time, where you're jockeying positions, and after that you are not interested, you just want to win. You just want your way to be the right way. It reached a stage where if we had not had that meeting that day, I don't know what would have happened. There would have been each one would have been blaming the other for something or the other. For all you know, careers may have got spoiled. Okay? Because the view that some people would have had is that these people are doing this, and the view these people will have is that person has got some angle in the whole thing. It could have ended up in messing up relationships all over the place. So the first thing we talked about was credibility. And the second thing is this whole thing about the communication being maintained through and through. The next example that I wanted to give was when we were, there was a time when I was working in a startup firm, and I tend to alternate between large companies and very small companies. So I was in the startup firm, and we were working in the early days on how do you use the internet.
In the previous case, what you mentioned, what is really surprising is the global CIO or was ready to communicate heavily with an external consultant, which is you, but he was not communicating with his own business unit in India. So,
What do you think?
It's very surprising to me, and then I don't see any valid reason for it.
See, very often.
Well, it's a wrong practice, but I don't see justification for it.
It's very common. It's extremely common. Okay. Because I can't really do anything to it. And I'm someone from the outside, so he can sit and find out everything about me. It also reflects on the culture within that company. And it was not exactly an easy company to work with. As far as he was concerned, talking to me and finding out what actually happened. He probably thought I can go there and I can grind this guy down and find out what exactly happened, and then I go and fix the corresponding person over there. So that was probably one thought. The second is, the reason many people talk to external people more easily is because they view that that person who's outside can't really do very much to it. So it's less of a risk. You'd be surprised if any of you get into consulting, the number of things people tell you which have nothing to do with what you come there for, but they just want to be able to talk to someone who has no axe to grind, so to speak. Incidentally, now there's a pretty big business in this stuff. There's a pretty big business in coaching and stuff like that, which is evolving in our country. It's all built around this whole thing of I have someone whom I can talk with. Does that address
What's the reaction of the India unit? Because
totally confusion.
That's the what I was looking at.
Totally confusion. But the thing was, by then, many of the people in India and I were pretty good friends. And that happens when you work with people. So later I told them, okay, this is what actually happened over there. So it became something which it builds up relations. It helps when you're working. It also helps subsequently as personal friendships. Yeah.
On the topic of consultants in politics, often we have also seen that warring factions within a company, they actually go out and get a consultant to act as a guinea pig, on whose shoulders they will actually shoot their ideas from.
Yeah.
So that, this idea is coming from the consultant, not from us. Also, they will actually feed the entire thing.
Very common. That's where, if you look at it, this example that I gave was a suspicion that that's what was being done. Right? Why did they come up with this kind of a solution? That's where it's very important to maintain a certain degree of personal integrity. In the area of change, if you're trying to drive change, what you're asking people to do is to alter what they believe in and to be willing to shift their stance or their focus. They're not going to do it if they don't trust you. So personal integrity becomes extremely important. fact, I believe this was a conversation I was having with my wife some years ago. We have a daughter, one who's finishing her teens and the other who's entering her teens at this point. And when the elder one was 13, she changed dramatically. All of a sudden, how she just became terribly important, boys became important, all sorts of things, and she'd have these moody silences and this and that and whatnot. And everyone was wondering, we're pretty liberal at home, and we were worried, will she go and do something stupid? And the debate was, how do we handle this situation? The challenge is over there, we raise children, telling them, think for yourself, apply your mind. Don't just do something because you've been told to do it. And when you come to a situation when they're older, you suddenly turn around and say, wait a sec, I want you to do this, I don't want you to do that. They won't listen. They should not listen at that point. Because that's what they have been brought up and trained to do, is not listen. It's to apply their own mind, take a call. So when we were debating, what do we do? It's all very well in theory, but now we've got this girl who we're a little nervous about. We agreed that finally that the only thing we can do is ensure that the values that we establish are very crystal clear and simple, and leave her to figure it out. And I believe as this world evolves, as pace of change keeps increasing, values will start playing a far more important role than anything else. I've had people tell me, clients tell me at one point, I trust you, I don't trust your organization. It left me floored. I didn't know what to do at that point in time. I subsequently left the company. Because I said, I can't continue to be associated with a company. And you don't know which one. I worked in 5 or 6 companies. I can't be associated with a company where a client is turning around and telling me that I can't trust the firm. Believe me, if there is one thing which I have found to be a huge asset through my career, it has been being honest, being very straightforward about that honesty. You can dump everything else, and people will turn around and say, if I can trust the person, I'll go ahead. And in the case of something like this, if you find out someone is trying to do that, and frankly that's what was the situation when I was told by a CEO this particular thing. You can't allow it to happen. You allow it to happen, and then after that you don't have that credibility anymore. And you won't be able to drive a change. Because people will say, this is engineering, this is maneuvering, this is not about trying to really help facilitate something that goes across. In fact, the third example I wanted to talk to you about was about facilitation. And this startup company I was talking about, we were trying in the early days of the internet to use the internet for marketing and offer it as a service. So this promoter had pulled together some people, and the mix of people in that firm were advertising on one side and software engineering on the other side, programs. And we just couldn't get them to work together. One crowd operated in one fashion, the other crowd operated in a completely different fashion. And each one thought the other was a total jerk. There's no way you can work with these people. Getting people to actually work together was a long drawn exercise, and a lot of it had to do with being able to get them to understand the other person's point of view and how they had to work together. Facilitation as a skill can be draining. You get exhausted at the end. If you become a prof and you start teaching, you'll find that the first few lectures are exhausting tasks. It takes a lot of preparation, lots of work, etc. It's not like just wandering in and saying, let me tell you about my experiences and then going through something like this. You have to actually spend a lot of time and effort preparing. Facilitation is even more draining because the duration over which you're doing it per session and over all the sessions is really long. And it can really wear you out in that kind of process. So you have to be convinced about the change that you're doing. And that's where the integrity part comes in. You don't believe that it's needed. If it's just a job, you won't be able to do it. You won't be able to do it, particularly on scale. You can do it for a small thing, but you can't do it on a large scale. It's very similar to what one of the guys in sales in one of the company, he was a sales director, and he was telling me, it was an FMCG company. He said that sales is very hard. Sales is very hard, not physically or whatever. It's because we tell the sales guy, I was asking him, why do you have these lavish dues at the end of the year for your sales force and all that? They take them here and then they have a ball and so on and so forth. You know that the guy has to go to each outfit and say, buy this, buy more, buy more. You keep on doing it, and he says, no, I will not. He says, I have to end every transaction with someone saying, enough, please leave. So, it's something that's so demotivating. You have to give these guys something to boost them up at the end of the year, which will last them for the next 1 year. So you take them to Kathmandu or you take them to Bangkok or something and let them have a great time and then bring them back and say, get back to your grind. Because it's terribly tiring. And this act of facilitation is very much like that. The topics that I've been talking about, let me just give you 2 or 3 things about what I believe will be very useful as a mechanism to help drive some of this change. The problem was, I've been for years trying to get people who I thought knew a lot about it to work on projects to help drive the change and change management. And I did not find any convincing model in place. Okay. And this has been a search that's going on for more than a dozen years. I think the most powerful thing that helps is having a very clear end state vision. The reason is, in any kind of large change exercise, it takes time. In any initiative which you're trying to bring about a big change in a large setup, it takes a lot of time to get it done. So in that time period, everyone is looking at today's goals, next week's goals, etc., etc. And then it becomes a routine job. And then they start getting bored. And then they see all those reasons why it's better not to do it. And they stick back to what we were doing earlier. So you have to keep reminding them of what is the goal, what's the spot at the end of the rainbow that you're searching for. And tell them how in life will be once you reach that particular goal. I'll string this through an example of what we're doing right now. The next very critical thing is you need to be very clear about a system and a plan of what is going to get done and therefore what is going to be the impact of that. You will be surprised. We all studied project planning. So actually the way I studied project planning was completely useless. Because I studied it as doing PERT and CPM and stuff like that. And I found that those are amongst the least useful things that I needed in project management compared to a whole lot of other stuff. But projects and project management, the pressure point that we end up having, we'll have a goal, we'll have all that. But we don't end up planning all the other things around it. Okay. Where the problem is going to come up, how is it going to be addressed, and so on. And there's a lot of pressure to cut those down because they add up cost into how you're going to execute it. And the last thing is how often you communicate. We're doing an initiative in Britania where a couple of months back we said we need to start focusing on driving competitiveness of our company. And to do that, we decided we will form a group of people, and we took a dozen people, created a separate department or group, so to speak. And for Britania, a dozen people is a lot, because the management pool is actually quite small. It operates more like a small company, with everyone having a fairly substantial span of control and authority. So taking a dozen people out of the company is actually a fairly significant issue. And we put them into this thing and said, this is the next big strategic challenge we have. We can't solve this problem by having people work on it alongside with their work. So you guys have to solve it and you have to implement it. You've got 2 years, and here are the numbers that you're going to meet by the end of the 2 years over there. And these were all people who were considered top performers, starting from just below VP level to entry level. So we had one bunch of very senior people and one bunch of very junior people who we brought to pull into this thing. To launch it, Vinitha is our managing director. We both went to each of our offices and first articulated what is it that we're trying to get done. Because while a dozen people can actually work on a whole lot of things, they can't implement it across the whole company, across all the locations that we operate out of and so on. So it is important that they will obviously have to work through everyone else. But if everyone else says, you know what, you're interfering with my work, you're making sure I don't meet my KRAs for this year, and so on and so forth, they won't be able to get much done. So what was the end state was communicated very, very clearly to people. And we had to do it, more than once. We spent, I think, about an hour, hour and a half calling everyone in the office together, talking to them, asking them to ask questions and this and that, so that they would be clear about what we're trying to achieve at the end of this exercise. Then after that, we went into, we brought in some global consultants, and they also put a dozen people onto that, so we became a rather large team that was working, and said we must have clarity on plan. Once we got the plans in place, we started doing a whole lot of communications. And the communication has to happen at all kinds of levels, because different people want to know different things. Even today, with all that effort being put in, people will not understand what's going on. You end up with problems of, this one's interfering with my work, that one's interfering with this work, etc., etc. For which we constantly have to keep redesigning systems and procedures and communication channels to go forward. It is, in my work on that project, it reports into me. My work on that project is 80% only that. Only facilitating and making sure that happens. Technically, I do nothing really. And that's good because there are a lot of good people there, they will do a much better job than I can do with them. But helping to iron out all those things is what I would end up doing. When we go forward, you're all going to go into an environment where you will not have authority. You will become everyone, irrespective of what role you're in. You're going to operate by and large the way consulting people tend to operate. You're going to influence people, you're going to try and get things done, and incidentally, authority doesn't work. Because the day you apply authority, it will be like the teenage daughter problem that I talked about. Once you apply authority, it will be only you tell me. Everything is you tell me, you tell me, you tell me. So if you want people to be independent, handle their own areas and so on and so forth, they have to think for themselves. Then you lose authority. So that time you are going to end up pushing things. You have to plan these things out. My mantra is just those 3 things. Be very clear about what you're trying to achieve at the end. Plan things out as much as you can and communicate repeatedly. The last thing that happens is it doesn't work. Usually it doesn't work. Things go wrong. Why do I spend 80% of my time on this project worrying about those things? Because something or the other will go wrong. Things you didn't anticipate will happen. Complex system, you can't make it deterministic. So you have to keep monitoring it and sensing and responding. Okay? I'm hoping that someday we will come up with a theory like what Asimov wrote in the Foundation series. Read that? It's a very interesting series. He wrote a trilogy and then went on extending it out to 25 years. The funda there is this guy, he creates a topic called psychohistory. He says, I can't predict what an individual will do, but I can calculate what a mass of people will do in terms of behavior. And the mathematics is complex. It's a bit like the behavioral economics that we're going through and evolving now. Taken to an extreme example, it's a science fiction story, so he can take it to any level he wants. But there, it's all about predicting human behavior. If we can get to that stage, we can make this into a more scientific thing. Until then, it will be an art. And I have yet to see evidence that it's a science. That's what I wanted to share. If you have any further questions or anything you'd like to talk about, or any other topic, please feel free.
You have been on consulting side, telling clients what needs to be done in terms of change management. And here in Britania, you're internally kind of driving certain things. A couple of questions I have is, how do you see the face of the change manager? Has it always to be an internal person, or does a consultant, can a consultant play that role in a client's organization? Because obviously, as you said, neither of these people will have authority at the other end, or they should not wield authority. Otherwise, the whole thing will actually go for a toss. Second is, do you see any major difference in terms of approach between a private organization and a public sector organization?
I think the first one, first question, which is external or internal. I don't have an answer, ready-made answer for that. It will depend a lot on circumstance that's over there. I'll give you an example. We're just launching a 360-degree feedback system for the company. And like most things in Britannia, which has a very vocal bunch of people sitting there, when you launch anything, people will come up with 100 reasons why you haven't thought of this, you haven't thought of that, what about this, what about that, etc., etc. So we have to plan any initiative quite carefully, and how it's going to be put before people, how they will react to it, etc. Nobody follows orders over there. Okay, that's not exactly true, but they're not going to just take whatever you say and accept it. So we actually did it as a combination. We had some people who were talking about, we looked at what were the elements that were affecting the success of that 360. The first part is we felt its context to business has to be extremely clear to people. So that why are we doing this initiative, how will it affect business performance, team performance, individual performance, and so on and so forth. And how do you position it? That part had to be handled internally. In fact, I conducted that part. I could relate it with what are our current business challenges. I could take individuals and point out what they were working on and how it is impacted by something else and so on. So the fact that I handled planning also helps over there. So you have to have a credible person talking about why that is important. Then when we come to the part about the mechanics of how a 360 feedback system as a procedure works, we got a person who was from outside, who has done it in 20 organizations to come and talk about it. Because she was in a position to give examples of what happened over there, how did this happen, how should you answer something, and so on. Because that carries credibility in that place. Then the third part was there's going to be a software that's going to be used for it, and your answers will be anonymous, etc., etc. I said, if I go around talking about it, anyone internally says, yeah, it will be anonymous, it will carry less credibility than the people who actually own that system and the whole facility talking about it and saying what it is. Then after that, when we come to what is going to happen as a result of that 360, again you bring an internal person to talk about it. So this is just one talk, but you have to plan each part to see what is it that's going to make most credible sense to the people who are going to hear it. Is this an authoritative source or not? Will I be able to talk about something convincingly? So let's say an internal HR person was talking about the vendor's software. Okay? People say, what the heck do you know about it? So it's important to put that person directly in front of them and carry more credibility. So you have to design it based on what the circumstances, what is the change you're trying to make. Sometimes it might be a completely independent third party you want to bring in to talk about something, or drive some particular piece of change.
Now the same topic, whether the systems, it is basically the process change that is, the most important in this whole scheme of things. And as a facilitator, when you're trying to kind of cut across different functions in a company and say that this is the way the process needs to be changed, the dictum actually has to come from the top. see, as a consultant, we can actually recommend that these are the best practices in the industry, these are the changes that as a company or in a function that should be done. Again, we don't have the empowerment to kind of, you can only recommend. But
I used to believe that. I don't. And I'll give you two reasons why I don't do it. One is we were working on strategy in the consulting arena. We used to think that, we don't have to worry about this change management nonsense. That happens when people are implementing something. It doesn't, I have to only get a great idea, and if I table that great idea and the logic, CEO looks at it and says, wow, and then thereafter it goes down the line. I could not have been more wrong. Okay. It was, we realized that the core of that idea has to be understood by people if they're going to have the willingness to make that change. So we actually incorporated driving that, readiness for change, not as an assessment, but getting people ready for that change as part of the strategy process itself. I've been in places where I have ended up talking to people below manager level in workshops while we were framing strategy, so that they're in a position to appreciate what is being attempted. And subsequently, the implementation team, when they come in, they find that everything is all ready and set up. People they're okay, they're geared, they know what it's about. They know how they're going to work, what they're going to do, why they're doing it, and so on. So getting change management aspects right up front was very important. The number of CEOs I have met who said that, it's the right thing to do, I know exactly what needs to be done, but these people are not doing it. They won't do it. You have to be able to convince people to do it. And that is not about, there is a lot of talk about mandate, top-down mandate. I think it's a lot of bullshit. Because top-down mandates don't work. They work if you have a social setup which is like the army. Okay? You're not going to shoot you. Then people might do it.
It doesn't happen that way.
Doesn't happen that way.
That's a common perception. I'll ask the question. I have something else in mind. After you finish.
But the fact of the matter is that people will not do it if you just order them. Because at the same time, we're also going and telling them, show initiative, think, don't just, can't you see that it was obvious you shouldn't have done that? So for all these reasons, we don't want people to do that. We don't want them to be machines. We want them to apply their mind. I find top-down mandates are very weak. I'll give you more examples outside. On the other part, I finished this question then.
Yeah, please.
The second question. Public sector versus private, I don't find significant. I think people are people. Okay? And I have worked with some fantastic people in the public sector. Okay? And I have worked with some really painful people in the private sector. Okay? And then there's this big thing about professional management and family-owned business. In 9 times out of 10, I find family-owned businesses are far better to work with than so-called professional managed firms. There are very few good professional managed firms, or at least ones that make sense. I think fundamentally people are people. They have the same kinds of challenges, okay, which actually shoots my argument about the RVP. And you need to address them as people.
No, I agree with you, but the reason why I asked this question was typically in a private sector organization, there are a lot of constraints. The CBC being, one part of it.
Public sector.
Public sector, yeah. So, in terms of those constraints, people actually, while people are people, because of those constraints, they tend to be acting in a different manner.
I'll give you a very small example. You'll be holding up everyone else's. There is this popular myth that in public sector there are lots of constraints. There are constraints for people who don't want to change. Okay. Wherever you want to change, I have found people have been able to do it. For example, in this deal I was talking about, which was a very large deal, there's this perception that you have to go by L1. Okay? You bid, they do a technical evaluation, everyone who clears it, then you go for the lowest cost bid. Actually, that is not the case. It is not a rule in the government of India that you have to go there. Okay? Because we challenged it, and they said, no, it's not necessary. We can adopt a different model. It needs a board level approval. We got a board level approval. We didn't do it. necessary that is there. If you take someone like E. Sridharan, who before these beams started falling down, his approach is very straightforward. He said he's a personal friend. Because I'm at heart, I still love engineering and great. I used to spend a lot of time with him. And he said, he went in, they had a 10-year plan, they said, okay, let's make it 7 years. Now let's figure out how to do it. And could they do it? They did it. So I don't fully buy that constraint business. If you want to change, you can. And if you want to block, you can do that also in any place you want. So you have.
Yeah, actually, I'm looking at it. I'm not very familiar with IT sector, but what I really just parked that from there. The role of looking at change management purely from a leader's perspective, and without having a separate change manager, the change management being a mandate, one of the mandates or the functions of a leader himself. One, what is your take on things like the organizational complexity, hierarchical, slightly more hierarchical, may not be army, but well, there are firms outside, may not be IT, like manufacturing or whatever, who have got, and the role, things like feedback, mid-course correction in your processes, they play in managing.
Can you just go to the first point again? I was not sure the question in that one.
What's the role of the hierarchical organizations? For example, I'll give you an example. You envision a particular change that you want in your organization. I'm not really familiar with that consultancy and client thing, but within the organization you're heading, however small or big it is, you envision a particular change that you would like to see in your organization, and you set up a process. Now, you suddenly realize that because of the hierarchy or the complexity, the exact essence has not even reached down to the person where you would like to.
Absolutely.
So the importance of role, the feedback. Actually, one question only. What's your take on this entire thing?
You articulated something which is a big issue. As children, we all play the game of Chinese whispers. Okay, so whenever you keep passing it on, and when you try to do it down a hierarchy, by the time it comes to the border, it's something completely different from what you said off. So it's very important. When I said communication can't be understated, and the fact that I gave an example where the MD and I went and addressed everybody. We called everybody into a room and talked to all of them. Despite that, there is still misunderstanding. Because people try to simplify it to something they can understand and say that's what it is. In terms. So when you're dealing with big change, it's very dangerous to expect that it will trickle, the communication will trickle through. And that's why I said you have to look at the communication at all levels. I don't mean it will go from level to level. I mean each level will get a particular kind of communication. So when we're doing, let's say, an initiative like what I was talking about, which is about driving a big scale change through the company over a period of 2 years, I have to plan one set of communications which goes to the vice presidents and the MD. I need another set of communications which the same team is going to make sure goes to all general managers. I need another one which will go to all the big level managers. I need another one which will go to all the officers through the thing. I use different mechanisms for it. I won't give the same message. But everybody has a stake in it. And therefore you have, what I will not do is give something to the top and say, okay, make sure that it goes all the way down.
No, actually, what I wanted to know was, what are the mechanisms for staying on course? That's
Well, again, very situation specific. Largely because I don't believe we have enough of science under it. Staying on course is critical simply because, as I said, it won't, finally I gave you those 3 points and I said last thing is it won't work. Because something or the other will come up. So, sensing this is a very, very important thing. It needs people, you need to be able to slot people, identify people at different positions who you can get feedback from. To know whether it's been understood, not understood, etc. Best is to get people in the team which is driving the change all sensitized to listening to what's happening.
because facilitation, which you said, that will come before that. You have to know what's the how much is seeped in.
Absolutely.
So you must have a gauge for that in any organization. I personally.
The other example of being able to, the fact that working through authority and mandate doesn't work very well. Some of the experiences we've been having with structured problem solving using a TQM approach. So there have been certain problems which we just could not solve. And then we got operational people together, gave them, because our style of solving problems is, you tell me the problem, I'll tell you, okay, do this. Okay. I have an answer and a solution ready immediately. So what you'll say is, okay, I'll go do this, you know what, it didn't work. And you told me to try it, I tried it, it's not working. So where's the problem? The problem is with you, what you suggested. So then it was the next stage was give it to the people who are going to work on it. Give them the time and space to solve it. Then they come up with the solution and then they implement it and they make sure it stays. This I am seeing more and more of. I'm seeing more and more of at all levels. So being able to get people to do things is going to be a big challenge. Did you have a question?
I just want to add what I felt in this change. For every change, in the hierarchy there is center of gravity. I mean, which has to have a buy-in for the change. Then only change will succeed. A change related to strategy may be at a higher level. Change related to process, you may have to go down to supervisor level. It could be any organization hierarchy. So that I think that buy-in by that center of gravity, which will probably percolate to the organization. That is important. You have to identify that center of gravity. And it will be different for different changes. That's what
I would differentiate between center of gravity, where I think you mean the person who actually has the biggest stake in that particular thing.
right, like balance board.
But to implement it, okay, the number of people, number of managements you will come across who will say, we know what needs to be done, we can't get it done. It's actually amazing. When I talk, and I've met a lot of senior people, CEOs, MDs, and so on and so forth in various companies. They're very intelligent people, that's why they got there in the first place. But why are they grappling with the problem? Why can't they get their companies to do what they want them to do?
But what I meant was the center of gravity will not be at the top level most of the time. It will be at the.
To understand what is your personal sense of achievement from whatever you've accomplished in life. And it's interesting that you mentioned that there's a core set of values that you need to ingrain in your kids and then you let them be. So I was wondering if you've always had that set of core values that stayed consistent over a period of time, and if you've seen the career choices you've made, if they've ever been in conflict with those values or your purpose in life, and how have you resolved those conflicts if they've ever been in conflict?
Actually, I didn't write to Amit, but there was the other topic that I wanted to. This was, should we talk about careers and what careers are likely to pan out to be in the future? At a very personal level, what was the goal that I had? When I was in engineering, I think I reached the third year of engineering, and suddenly I said, what does a mechanical engineer do when they finish studying? Because all the stuff that I was studying, when I met, say, my father's friends and others who were all engineers, and they'd say, what are you studying now? I say, this is what I did. Oh yeah, I remember that theory I did long time ago, this. Everybody talks about the theory they did a long time ago. And I said, what are we doing there? I mean, are we just learning something which later I also say, yeah, I did this long time. So I asked my friends, they didn't know, obviously. I asked some of my seniors who had no clue either. I knew he went and asked a prof, why am I studying your course? So he started explaining. I said, by the way, nobody in the class knows. So why don't you come and explain to all of us? And we organized each of our profs to come and talk to us about each of their subjects, saying, what can I do with it later? So I went through a lot of life not having a clue of what I wanted. Okay, I just went along because you finish school, then you're supposed to get into college, then once you do college, then you go and get a job, you just drifted. So after I finished my MBA, I said one of the things I wanted to do was to attempt something on my own. So within a year or so of working, I quit my job and I said I'm going to be a consultant. There was just me, and I was about 2 years, 1.5 years of experience, and I wanted to go and tell people how to run things. I spent about 6-7 years. We built up a built up a firm, did all sorts of things with it. But it was in the course of that I realized I don't get a kick out of making money. I like to be paid well, but it can't be everything for me. I realized I like solving problems, but I fundamentally realized what I wanted most was to have a good time with my family. So a lot of my decisions around life were actually revolving around making sure that as a family unit, we were a happy family, so to say. That doesn't necessarily translate into, everyone having all the time a great time, but as we like to be a good family unit. The second thing that I like doing is I like newness. I don't like doing the same thing on and on and on. So if I've done something for 3-4 years, I start getting bored with it. So I like to take up something very different. So last year when I moved into HR, for example, I had no clue about HR, except to crib about it through most of my career. Then suddenly they said, Vinita called me and said, why don't you handle HR? My answer was, me, HR, you know what you're letting yourself in for? I said, go ahead and give it a shot. So I started doing HR, where I was previously as nerdy as you can get, looking at IT and processes and business planning and so on. So the second thing that for me is very important is that. The third is, if I don't work with a set of people, who I enjoy working with, I will not work with them. I will leave. So when you're asking me what are those core principles, if you look at it, they're all very personal principles. I realized very early I don't want to become a CEO. I ran a company for two occasions, and both occasions I didn't like it. I like solving problems and working on things and getting solutions out. So I think that's what I would like to do. So each person will have a mix. You identify what it is and then you go forward with doing that. I believe in honesty. So therefore I try to be as honest as possible at all times, and that is something which has carried through for a long time. Because it's very easy to twist facts around. Okay? It's very difficult to build a reputation for honesty and credibility. So doing that, I believe, is very important. I believe in individual choice. I am passionate about that. I don't like people telling me, you cannot do this. I like taking that choice myself. So there will be various things like that which will get built up. And then you go for it. I like getting paid well. Okay, so I also work and make out how you can figure these things out if you want to and get something which meets as many of your requirements as possible. So I'll just take this question.
I don't know whether there's a question somewhere there.
Sorry, does that address your...
Yeah, what about the personal sense of achievement? Do you think you've accomplished whatever you set out to do?
Well, I think we have a very happy family. Okay, so as far as that's concerned, and I'm still working on that. Okay. So I don't think that I'm off as far as that is concerned. We don't have any financial concerns at this point in time, which makes it easier for you to enjoy it. So all that part was the most important thing. On the other fronts, in terms of a professional career, I like change and I like doing things that are new. I'm not hung up about designations. Okay? I'm not hung up about what. So I will cheerfully, when I joined this company for about 8 months, 9 months, I had nobody reporting to me. In fact, Vinita was after me several times saying, why aren't you building up a team? I said, I don't want a team. Okay? I will work through the people who are there and get it done. So we were doing a lot of work on the process side, which had nothing to do with having a team of people working on it. So, number of people reporting, all that ceases to interest after a point in time. And at least for me. So it's about what you would like to do, and are you doing that kind of stuff? Are you enjoying it and going ahead with it? Sorry.
I don't know whether there is a question somewhere there. You talk about credibility from the integrity point of view and from the point of view of knowing your job.
there's managers who are probably looking at taking a shift in a sudden shift in the industry they are going to work in. How do you build that credibility when you go to work?
One of my close friends was working in Taco. He's working in Taco Electronics. He's been working there a long time. He told me about a trip that he made to Europe when this bunch of senior set of managers were meeting up in Taco. This was some years ago. And he came back and said, Alagu, you know what? The guy was talking about the fact that you're all people who have substantial experience and you must all be in your second, if not your third careers by now. I don't mean jobs, I mean the areas that you work in. Okay? And if you haven't, you should be worried. See, the fact of the matter is, you can't say I am an expert in this field. Okay, this is another thing that I believe in, worldview. You can't say I am an expert in this and expect to do that the rest of your life. You could have done that 40 years ago. You can't do that now. If you look at the economy today, and you look at the growth of jobs, I think something like 30, 40, if not more, percent of the jobs that have been created in the last 10 years didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. So who planned that career and said they will go into? Where was the expertise when they get into something like that? Me, I love areas which are completely new. Okay? Why? Because if an area has been there for donkey's years, you have a lot of people who spend their time fine-tuning the capabilities in that area. If you come to something that's completely new, okay, everyone is equally dumb at it. And as long as you're willing to take a jump into it, you can go there and do something. In fact, the people who are experts hesitate to get into that because it's very different from their skill set. So, going forward, as pace of change increases, I firmly believe that the nature of jobs that will be available and offered will be dramatically different. And you can only prepare for it from a capability perspective, not from a knowledge and expertise perspective. Something like, I think they have a capability-based strategy as against a goal-based strategy for a firm in this. So build up the necessary capabilities which you think are going to be important in the future, and then use them. See what opportunity comes up. Addresses it?
I think you partially answered the question while answering this question. What kind of capabilities do you think organizations will be looking for down the line in terms of changing environment? So much of change happening in the industry. What kind of changes what kind of qualities they would look for in people when they read?
So one is, I believe that the role of the generalist will become much more important. The ability to synthesize more than analyze. We've become very good at analysis. We're very poor at synthesis and generation of ideas. And in our country, we have put a premium on analysis. Actually, we put a premium on memorizing. I twisted my knee very badly some months ago playing a game of football. And I tried to ignore it for some time, it became too bad, so I started going for some physiotherapy. So there was this young girl who was helping me with that whole physio thing. She's a trained physiotherapist. Then she tells me, give me one set of exercises. The next time I went, she said, okay, tell me which of the exercises you learned. So I told her, here are some 8 or 9 of them. So then she said, oh, you remember them all? I said, yeah, I've been doing them. So obviously I would remember them. She said, no, a lot of people who come here won't remember. In the 5th visit, they won't remember. Were you a topper in your class? So I said, no, I was not a topper in my class. And I wanted to get on to my whole funda about, it's not about memorizing, you have to be able to think, you have to do this and do that. But I was just thinking, this person's view in life is that if you are smart, is equivalent to being able to remember a whole bunch of things. And what a waste that is. So I think that going forward, the ability, in our cultures, we don't emphasize generation of ideas, we don't emphasize enough risk-taking, the ability to, this whole thing of influence, not authority. Many people I find in India find that very difficult. They would like, we say, let's get this done. First thing they will tell me in companies, can you make sure it comes into so-and-so's KRIs? So I said, why should it come into the person's KRI? No, if it doesn't figure in the KRIs, it won't happen. Okay. To me, that's a reflection of the current way of thinking. But going forward, our challenge is less on the technical things. You can get technical easily. Being able to synthesize that, being able to get people and drive that change is very, very important. We believe that behaviors are going to become very critical for us, far more critical than just knowledge. So what we're doing in our company now is we're trying to emphasize the behavioral aspect a lot more. We are also emphasizing very, very deep knowledge in science and other things, things like nutrition, understanding the wheat. Wheat is a big input for Britannia, understanding dairy. So we're busy hiring nutritionists and PhDs and getting people to something that's not going to give us a tangible input now, but we believe that over a course of 4-5 years, that kind of deep knowledge, building networks across institutions will become very important. The in-between ground, how do I get a good supply chain? I can always get someone in to help me design that and put that in place. How do I create a great consumer communication? That is something the marketing guys have outsourced years ago. I don't think any marketing guy spends halfway enough time thinking about that aspect. They leave it to the ad agencies to do it. So you can get expertise. The ability to synthesize and take a picture of where you want to go, and the ability to get people to do that, I believe is going to be very important.
But sir, specifically to what Jayesh had asked regarding establishment of credibility, don't you feel that some of the core values which are required for establishing a credibility, especially in cases of change, or rather we changing our jobs or you been changing jobs, they actually remain the same, the core things. I mean, the kind of communication skills that you have, your honesty, your take on that, whether it's your dependability quotient, whether you can build trust, these are the things which are ingrained, whether you change to X to Y or Z to A or whatever.
At the end of the day, people want good human beings. Okay. What you just described, if you go back in philosophy, whether it's Greek or Indian or wherever, you'll find that that is what they expect a person to be. Most old texts will talk about that's what they expect a man to be. Most of them didn't have, were not very gender correct at that point in time. But essentially they say that that's what is required. You need to be an all-rounder. Sorry,
See, my question is on career management.
Ooh, wrong person to ask. Anyway.
See, your career has spanned one or two functional units, being a CIO, doing process, moving on to so how do you manage these transitions?
I do.
I mean, is it by accident? I mean, is there some design somewhere?
Okay. It's a personal viewpoint that I'm giving. Most of what I'm saying is about personal viewpoint. I have a great belief that whether you take people, you take the economy, you take the network of an industry, whether you take the world as a whole, it's a system that is far too complex to model and predict. I come from a background of desiring. I loved OR, I loved programming, I did all those kinds of things earlier, which was built on a very deterministic model and a view of the world in general. Over the years I realized that that's not true. And I believe now that it's far too complex for you to model. So, coming back to the point that I was making there are certain things that you have to keep asking yourself, at least I do. What is it that you like? What type of stuff do you like to do? And then the second part is being opportunistic about it. If you see a good opportunity, something is interesting. So when Vinita called me up once and said that I'm looking for someone to help me increase the level of process orientation across the company. I don't know what job it is. I don't know what it's about. But I heard that you might be a person who would be interested in looking at this. Some common person, friend had told her about. So I said, let's talk. Okay. I hadn't a clue what she wanted. I didn't know anything about Britannia, but the whole concept sounded interesting. And I said, let's explore it and see what comes out of this thing. So we had 2-3 meetings generally talking about what's your view in life, what do you want to get done in the company, what's your view in life, what do you want to do for yourself, and so on. And we sort of honed in on let's do something useful. The brief that I had when I came in was as vague as that. I want to increase the process orientation. The brief that I had when I went to my previous company was Godfrey Phillips was we want to web enable the company. So I had to interpret what the heck does web enable the company mean, translate it into something that made sense for the managers over there, and then say, okay, let's implement it. But that kind of stuff is what I like doing. Also, the reason I like doing that is, when I was in school, I decided that I don't like competing. I don't like saying that, I'm this much better than you, I have so many marks more than you, this. Maybe because I never got much better than everybody else. I said the best way to do it is go where there is no competition. Later I found that it actually was far more interesting. Because the kind of stuff that you do, it's so stressful initially, in the sense that you can't go on autopilot. You have to keep thinking of what you're doing, why you're doing, how will it add value, what will happen, etc. And as you're doing it, you start building up a whole set of afterwards you can always rationalize it. Oh, okay, you've got experience in this, you got experience in that, you got experience in that. You can rationalize anything. So the way I approach it is there is always going to be opportunity. It's about you being able to creatively figure out, does that make sense? Is this something that will interest me? Can I make an impact in it or not? And if I can, let's go. Not very different from what you would be studying about business and business strategy. There are certain core things that a business believes in or is good at. And if you look for opportunities, then you don't exploit the opportunity. I see no reason why people shouldn't think the same.
Shall we take all the questions outside?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's holding up a lot of people to know. Thanks very much for being so patient.
Anil Gupta, manager at NABARD. Thank you.